The best description I have ever come up with for Craig Green is that he's like a civil engineer having an acid trip. And you can kind of see it, right? It's like civil engineers are very focused on practical solutions to real world problems. It's all use case, use case, use case. As a group of people, they're not very into decoration. But Craig Green always looks like he was designing a solution to a real world problem, but then halfway down the road, he got distracted finding a solution to a physics problem that doesn't actually exist. It's not the opposite of practicality, it's like the contrapositive. Like the best laid plans of a biophysicist got flipped upside down and played backwards underwater. It often looks like Craig's collections were him attempting to build something rather than design clothes. And the results often have the complete look of someone who knows very well how to build things, but also the surreal bizarreness of someone who is, tripping on acid. And this jacket is actually a great example of that. It is one of my favorite pieces in my wardrobe. It is a very polarizing jacket, which is to say that it is super weird looking. This is one of the best examples of fashion storytelling that I have ever come across. And we do need to talk about that actually. Like the ability of an object to tell a story, it's really hard to do. And a lot of people I think would maybe look at that and say practical objects can't tell a story. That would be like energy drink packaging telling a story, or like a lawnmower or a clock or something. I can say with confidence that it is hard to do, but Craig Green is a modern master of this. So he had no problem doing exactly that. All right, we're gonna try something a little bit different. Hey, be selfish. Join my Patreon. Once you join the motherfucking Patreon, you will get all of this stuff that you don't have. You love stuff. I know you do. When you join the Patreon, all of a sudden, all of that stuff will come just bursting into your life. You'll have it all at once and it will all be yours and you will love it. Please be selfish and join my Patreon today. Patreon.com/BlissFoster. Treat yourself. So in order to reach into this jacket and pull the story out, we need to talk about the world that Craig Green is building generally. And he mostly is building that world by combining two very unlikely things. The first one is all things technical. There is a great quote from Marine, what's it called? Here we go. Quaker Marine. There is a fantastic quote from the outdoors brand Quaker Marine that says, "Sometimes when you have the courage to choose functionality over fashion, you wind up back at fashion's doorstep." I think Craig would agree with that. Maybe with the qualifier of the acid thing. By the way, this is a good time for me to specify that I have no idea if Craig Green has even tried acid before, and how would I even know? I've never done acid before, but it does kind of have that look to it, right? I've technically clickbaited you into watching this video about an awesome jacket, which really, if you think about it, is that clickbaiting at all? This is a puffer jacket. It is a favorite garment of fashion's technical obsessives, and the original runway piece, it's worth noting, wasn't technically a puffer jacket. It looked more like a shirt, which is strange because we all associate this kind of like puffy nylon stuff with puffer jackets, right? Because it is it's puffy, Puffington, puffless of her. Puff. Okay, so technical stuff. It should be noted that textiles were one of the first human inventions. Cloth itself is inherently technical. In fact, what we take for granted now is that garments like this one, which is about 1,700 years old, took over 760 manual hand hours to craft together because there were just no tools back then for making stuff like this. We have come a long way. So cloth, very technical, meant to solve problems. It is fully practical in its own way. So fast forward many, many years, when Eddie Bauer first started mass manufacturing puffer jackets in the 1930s, it was one of the biggest leaps forward in cloth and fabric and clothing being a tool for humans. And that tool's primary purpose is that it doesn't let you die when it's really cold. Puffers are one of the most technical jackets. All of this was just to say that. On this Craig Green jacket, we have a ripstop material. We, of course, remember that ripstop is a type of weave that looks like a bunch of little squares, usually on nylon, so that a tear on the fabric won't continue to spread. Ripstop was originally developed for military use in parachutes because someone would deploy a parachute, it would not have ripstop in it, and then someone on the ground would try to shoot them and they would miss them and they'd be like, oh, almost got him, but then the bullet would go through the parachute and it would slowly tear until the parachute had ripped apart and then the person would fall to their death. They needed that to stop happening, so they did the ripstop so that you could fire bullet holes through it all day long and the bullet hole would just stay a bullet hole, it wouldn't get any bigger, and you could still safely land on the ground. Bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, brah! Brah. That is 100% going to be the cringiest part about like the SoundCloud rap era. Brah. Oh shit, it sounds like his mouth is a gun. You'll notice that you're technically looking at two fabrics of two slightly different colors on this jacket. One is translucent and one is opaque. You can kind of see that here. The top layer is such thin nylon that most folks who feel this thing make a joke about it being made of trash bags. And it's kind of beautiful in a strange way, right? Like in the same way that construction hardware is very beautiful. It just kind of makes you feel safe or aroused, depending on your sensibilities. Moving on! We have these ropes that go around a few different places on the jacket. Very open weave on these. They're technically drawstrings. Usually there would be a drawstring here and we'd use it to cinch the clothing to protect the wearer from wind. That's kind of a purist utilitarian use. So obviously that more purist idea is one that's very practical, and then also drawstrings are used to cinch up the waist on longer women's coats so you can create more of an hourglass figure. That's for aesthetics, but it is a practical, it's like a function of the jacket still, right? Okay, so these drawstrings are doing neither of those things, neither utilitarian nor aesthetic function. It's just the idea of functionality built into the jacket. The ropes are there purely for decoration. Almost luxuriating in their uselessness, right? Like, for one, they get picked apart really easily. So despite looking beautiful, they're very fragile. You can also see how they just kind of snake around the jacket in a lot of places. There are sections of these drawstrings that are covered by the transparent material, which I think does look really excellent. I love the runway version of this, but you can see that there wasn't really a plate, like a piping yet for the drawstrings, and I like the way they did it on the final product better. Those drawstrings are a continuation of a parade of many other Craig Green practical tools that serve no real purpose in the clothing. Like in spring 2020, Craig showed a number of pieces based on this clothing folder device that Marie Kondo apparently uses. Like, have you seen these before? You apparently use them so that you can fold all of your clothes exactly the same so that everything in your house can look like it was developed by AI. So a screen print of that device's shape is printed onto what appears to be a muumuu or like a hospital gown type garment that itself would surely not be easily folded. Later on in spring 2023, we had these medical devices that are meant to cover a stoma after a laryngectomy. Like, you know those holes in people's throats that they get if they've smoked for many decades? Those things that like cover them up so they can talk? That's what a stoma is. Later on in the show, there were these kind of industrial looking kites that billowed behind the closing looks as well. And the surrealist, almost like acid trippy part of this is really brought out by these exterior pockets. Technically, these can be folded up into the inside of the jacket, but like, why would anyone do that? You were clearly meant to ride the lightning and just have everything just hanging out all over the place. Okay, so yes, lots of things that are meant for a practical purpose that may or may not actually be serving that purpose. That is one huge side of what Craig Green's story is. But the thing that makes him a real genius and what makes this a piece of storytelling at all is that it's not just that category of usefulness, practical things. It's that he combines that with the other big part of Craig Green's universe, and that is spirituality, or at least ritual. Over both sides of the chest and centrally on the back, we have the visual centerpiece of the jacket. The way this extra, if we're being honest, this kind of trash bag-like material is kind of tied off, permanently strapped down tightly to the jacket. This motif is very consistent across Craig's body of work. These details are strongly reminiscent of a fearful time in human history when we would do these very specific rituals to appease gods that we were afraid of.
Yeah, it's like also like talismans. I've always been obsessed with that idea that you would believe in something so much that you believe in an object so much that it could protect you or it could save you. I love that kind of blind belief.
This photo here seems to be making reference to human sacrifice through drowning, or more likely it could be a reference to the evil 17th century practice of witch swimming, which is where you would take an innocent woman who had done nothing wrong and then drown her, and then if she died as a result of people forcibly drowning her, that meant that she was a witch and was guilty and should have died anyway. Now, do I think that Craig had that up on the mood board, like witch swimming, that's what we're going to make this based off of? Probably not. But when you look at this, it is a practical object, right? It's a raft. A raft is meant for the most practical thing possible, which is don't let the person die when they're out on open water. Okay, so part of what seems to be making this raft operate is that it is buoyanced by people, which is not right. So there is kind of this idea of human sacrifice for the use of practicality kind of sewn into this idea.
Does it not just look like very, very aggressive baptism?
My wife just said it just looks like a really aggressive baptism. It's like the most Catholic baptism. That was really good. Craig seems to be referencing a terrifying period of human history when everything fell out of our control. And the way that we made sense of the world was through ritual. It was how we felt like we were able to wrestle some of that control back from nature and bad luck. We would clutch onto talismans, we would chant, we would burn effigies, we would burn people, just anything to give us a slight edge over the chaotic world around us. What makes Craig a genius to me is that he combines these two things in a way that makes you remember that all of that needless ritual that we've grown out of, right? Like, great news, we're here in the modern world now, we don't need all of that ritual anymore. But Craig kind of points out that we sort of took that with us even though we didn't need it. Like, if you find the most atheistic person in the world, someone who would say they do not believe in anything other than hard facts, that person will still press an elevator button multiple times. They will still have a pair of lucky socks. And the whole idea of investing all of this time and money and energy into things like air conditioning and cars and financial forecasts and iPhones and monster truck rallies was to assure ourselves that we are, in fact, in control of our own lives. But we're here in the present now, and we found out that we're still kind of not. We don't feel like we're in control because we aren't. So we keep our rituals, and we keep our tech, and we move through life with both. I guess I don't know for certain. I never pretend like I know exactly what designers are thinking when they make stuff like this. But to me, I feel like Craig is sort of encouraging us to feel a little bit less guilty about the rituals that we do have in our own lives. Like, kind of trying to celebrate them a little bit, make them something that's beautiful, or in Craig's case, just look really badass. Because I mean, if it's something that we are going to have with us for the rest of our lives, we treat food in a very reverential way. Why not make our rituals kind of a beautiful part of our lives as well, right? Love you. Join the Patreon. Peace.